Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Fago Muradian here at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, home of the Coalition Air Operations Center that manages combat air operations over Syria, Iraq, the whole Middle East, the Horn of Africa, as well as all the way up into Afghanistan. While everybody thinks of this base and as the home of the KAOC, it's also home of the 379th Air Expeditionary Wing, the Grand Slam Wing, a moniker from World War II when it was one of the most effective bomb wings in the United States Army Air Force at the time. And we've got the vice commander of the wing here, Colonel Jeff Schreiner, who's a B-2 pilot himself. So you're coming from a bomb heritage, 509th Bomb Wing in Whiteman Air Force Base in Mississippi. Sir, thanks very much for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us.
Hey, welcome, and welcome to the Grand Slam Wing. So it's an amazing opportunity to get out here and see really the tip of the spear and what the mission is here at Al Udeid and what we bring to the fight.
It's an extraordinary unit. You guys have an enormous amount of capability from B-52s that are based here, from fighter aircraft that are based here, tankers and other sort of assets that support operations across the region. You've got 5,000 airmen that are part of this wing. Talk to us about the kind of capabilities, kind of aircraft that you guys have to translate some of the things that the folks in the KAOC are coming up with all the way to effects downrange.
So I think what is unique about Al Udeid is that really it touches the entire mission, really from the beginning of the kill chain all the way to the end. So, finding and fixing, we have big wing ISR assets here with the RC-135 rivet joint, the E8 joint stars that are able to go out there and develop the intelligence that is really needed to do the targeting in this type of fight, and then be able to track and then eventually get to a targeting solution. And then with the organic capability of the B-52s and bombers on the ramp, you have the ability to actually go out there and make those strikes and then follow up and make the assessments of what needs to happen after that. You pair that with something like the Combined Air Operations Center here, where you have immediate crosstalk and the ability to digest that intelligence. It really makes for an effective team in order to go after either our adversaries in Syria and Iraq with ISIS or ISIS-K and the Taliban in Afghanistan.
There's a lot of talk about a geriatric Air Force. General David Deptula, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant General Dave Deptula, has talked about that. There's been a lot of utilization across the force since, as the Air Force likes to remind everybody, we've been in sort of constant cyclic operations since 1990, not just since 2001. From a wear and tear standpoint, how's your fleet of aircraft doing? What are your availability rates, and as much as you're allowed to discuss them, in being able to deliver effects when needed, on a timely basis?
So what I would say, without getting into details of that, it is a very rare occasion where we are not able to provide the air tasking order with the required air assets that need to go out. So yes, we do have a lot of older airframes on the ramp, especially when you look at the KC-135 fleet and the B-52s themselves. I mean, it's not unusual to have 1960, 1961 models sitting out there on the ramp. But I think it's important to remember that the Air Force has done an amazing job over the years in terms of how it has maintained these aircraft. And even though they are older and eventually they will have to be replaced, they are really proving the amazing capability of our maintainers and our operators day in, day out here as they meet the air tasking order and are able to put gas, intelligence assets, and iron in our mobility assets downrange, which are 130s as well.
Innovation is the name of the game. We were at the Air Warfare Symposium, and the Air Force Chief of Staff and Air Force Secretary General Goldfein, as well as Secretary Wilson, but also all of the major MAJCOM commanders, major command commanders, were talking about innovation. And we talked to General Harigian as well, the commander of U.S. Air Force's Central Command, about innovation. How are you guys innovating? How are you taking ideas from the airmen on the flight line to, as General Harigian likes to point out, we're not innovating for just for innovation's sake. We're innovating to solve specific problems that we have. How are you guys taking sort of ideas, even when the junior-most airman comes out with it, and implementing it?
So without getting into a lot of specific details on that, we talked a little bit earlier about the kill chain and how we find and fix targets and eventually get to a targeting solution to get to potentially kinetics downrange. We've had some amazing innovation here in terms of how we meld that all together. So there's some unique synergy to having ISR assets on the ramp, like the RC-135 and the E8, and being able to connect the crews, even across the table sometimes, to be able to come up with some innovative solutions to pass information around a lot more quickly and a lot more effectively to get to those targeting solutions. So you pair that with the good comms that the CAOC brings to the fight to be able to work with partners that are out around the AOR. And we have found some pretty innovative ways in order to use the already good systems in even better ways to get to those solutions to get after ISIS.
You know, you guys do an incredibly complex mission and are delivering effects, but generally it tends to be almost invisible, right? The effects sort of happen, and there are space guys halfway around the world that are helping making that happen. There are guys in underground bunkers, there are guys on flight lines, but folks are not necessarily seeing it. From your standpoint, do you sense that folks actually appreciate what you guys are doing and understand, or do you feel like it's almost like a utility, that it's a switch and nobody goes, hey, thank God the lights are on, and it becomes a little bit like that where you guys are doing all this, but the expectation is it's going to get delivered. I mean, do you get that sort of sense of appreciation from folks?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think being out here for 8 months in this fight and in this theater, what I have seen through direct conversations is that we like to make a lot of the force rivalry between Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, but at the end of the day, the Air Force has delivered when it comes to that stuff. So whether it's target development, trying to get down to a specific target to support somebody on the ground. People have an understanding that when you ask the Air Force to get something like that done, it's going to get done, and it's going to get done well to the point of execution of getting the bomb on the target. That it's important to note that we have amazing partners in the other services that are out there in this fight, in the thick of this fight, and we understand where our role fits in that, and that our role is to provide them, in many cases, either the support from an intelligence standpoint to help them, or all the way down to that kinetic strike. And like you mentioned, you throw space and cyber into the mix of that too. That's really where you get to the total force concept. So total force in the Air Force is often thrown around as the National Guard reserves and our active duty components put together. Total force in a fight like this is all the services coming together to make it happen. So, and you see it every single day in this theater happening.
And you feel that time pressure that, as a couple of airmen friends of mine have told me, like, we feel the pressure that there are guys on the ground that are expecting that support.
Yeah, absolutely. Without getting any details, any of the strikes that I've seen here, there are definitely times where seconds count, and you've got to make sure that you execute it properly, because if you don't, then people that you don't want to die are going to die. So that's happening in this theater, in this fight all the time. And I think that is oftentimes or sometimes lost, when that message gets carried back to the States. So we've got airmen, soldiers, Marines, you name it, that are in the thick of this, doing some amazing work, and unfortunately in some cases losing their lives doing it. So we can't lose sight of that.
You have been at this base for 8 months. You've got a couple of more months to go before you get to go to your next assignment. But when you and I were talking before the interview, you said about how dramatically the mission and how even pace of operations and everything has changed. Talk to us about that change you've experienced as the mission in Syria and Iraq has changed, but also the mission in Afghanistan has changed.
Okay. Yeah, when I showed up here at the end of June last year, and that was still really the heat of the fight with ISIS and still in Iraq at that point. Mosul, Al-Qaim, some of the major cities were still held by ISIS at that time. We have had nothing short of an amazing push against ISIS in both Syria and Iraq to really degrade them down to an ineffective fighting force at this point, and a force that is pretty much on the run. So as that has evolved, it doesn't mean that there's not still a fight there, because there's always the chance of reconstitution of a force like ISIS. But there's been at least a conceptual shift more towards Afghanistan as of late, looking at how we disrupt both ISIS-K and the Taliban there. And a lot of that is, as you know, publicly going after a lot of the narcotics labs in order to take away their sources of funding. So that's a different kind of fight. That's a different type of targeting being done than what we were doing against ISIS in Iraq. But we've made that pivot pretty much flawlessly and are now able to put iron down range as required to do that.
And I don't want to get into specific aircraft numbers, but for the audience to get a sense, it's about 100 aircraft that are based out of here.
So our numbers fluctuate a lot, and one thing I like to tell people about Udeid is that Udeid is really kind of a shock absorber for the AOR. So right now we're well below 100. We have not as many tankers on the ramp right now as we normally have. I'm not going to get into specific basing decisions and how we do that in the AOR. So our numbers fluctuate a lot. So to try to pin a specific number down, I would say that we have the ability to rapidly scale up, and we have in times, and we frequently will get airframes, not even Air Force airframes sometimes, that will come in here and do a 6-month rotation. So I don't get stuck so much on the numbers. It's really the capability, the location, and the central nature of Udeid in the CENTCOM AOR that provides that ability to have strategic reach with our big wing assets that we have here.
And speaking about a big wing, you guys are actually one of the only bases in the world that has almost limitless expansion capability in terms of ramp space, facilities, runways. So you can actually host a lot more aircraft than you have.
Yes, there is a lot of ramp space here at Udeid, and one thing that has made that possible over the years is really our Qatari hosts understanding that this is a unique mission and that this is a unique location, truly a strategic location. So there's been a lot of expansion over the years. I mean, this was a one-runway operation with limited ramp space when it first started, and then the addition of the outside runway that allows us to bring B-52s in here has really made this base into a true, multi-airframe, across-the-board base that can go after the mission in many different ways.
And you mentioned B-52s. I've got to ask you about the B-1s that are coming here. What are some of the changes you're making to bed down that capability, and what does that add to your arsenal, to your quiver in terms of the capabilities you'll be able to deliver?
So really, as far as the bed down goes, it will be almost a seamless swap out in terms of the B-1s coming back to the AOR. The B-52s have played an incredibly valuable role in the 2 years that they've been here, and it's really been an opportunity for that community to shine and show what they can bring to the fight. And I think put a lot of naysayers to the side in terms of the age of the B-52 and really whether or not it was going to still be relevant going forward. We've shown that it's an airframe that can do amazing things in a current and relevant fight. The B-1s are going to step in and do great work in probably exactly the same way with that airframe. Very similar capabilities as Global Strike Command's done upgrades to both airframes over time. So we look forward to what will be probably the B-52s will walk out one day and the B-1s are going to walk right back into the air tasking order the next day, and with very little change and bringing at least the same capability, if not even better, to the fight.
Just the B-1s are a little bit louder and a bit faster.
Yeah, that's really the big difference. Maybe a little bit more on the tanker bill due to those engines, but in terms of numbers of bombs and capability brought to the warfighter, it's going to be very similar.
But I want to talk about the people side of the equation. I have two airplane questions. One is, you mentioned tankers. There's never enough tankers for what everybody wants to do. And from your guys' standpoint, this is a ferociously tanker-hungry theater. Whether folks to get to Afghanistan, that is a long haul to get over there. Even to get over to Syria and Iraq, it's a haul, and then Horn of Africa is a haul. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about tanker support. Do you have enough of it? And what is the system you use that, hey, when you got to ring the bell and you get augmented? Talk to us a little bit about that process on how, when you guys need more gas pushers to support operations, especially complex operations, that you guys have it when you need it.
So a lot of that magic really happens over in the Air Operations Center. They do a very good job of forecasting out what those gas needs are going to be, whether it's against the day-to-day look of the air tasking order of the current operations that we're doing, or they're forecasting out of what a possible increase in operations could be. They make those adjustments, and then Lieutenant General Harigian makes force laydown adjustments as required around the AOR to make sure we have the right tankers in the right place at the right time in order to get the gas to the receivers. You're right, it is an asset that is stretched thin. There's always a demand for gas. It's a lot of ground to cover here in the CENTCOM AOR, but there's other AORs that have the same problem if you look at PACOM. But right now, the tanker fleet as we have it we meet the tasks every day, and that's really what the most important thing. So nobody goes home for lack of gas, and we have been successful in doing that in the 8 months that I've been here.
If only aircraft were as aerodynamically smooth and efficient at range and payload as a B-2. Sorry, I thought I'd give you that little shout out there. There is a lot of talk about close air support. The Air Force is going through the OAX program, which is the prop counterinsurgency aircraft that would be for the close-in fight. As somebody who's involved in the whole delivery of effects thing, is that something that when you look at your laydown and all of your capabilities, is that something you look at and say, you know what, that would be a really neat capability, and this is how we would use this in sort of the big master plan of delivering effects, all the way from the high side, which is a big bomber at altitude, to the F-15 that's lower down, to an F-22 that's coming in and giving its own special contribution to the fight. Where do you think that element of it fits in, and how would you guys use it?
So that's a complex question to answer, and I think that it would fill a unique role in the CAS mission. So primarily what we do here is close air support. Each airframe that you use for close air support is going to come with trade-offs. So whether you're using a fighter or using a bomber, you have to look at what it brings. With a bomber, you have incredible time and ability to loiter, and with lots of weapons, which is really what the B-52 is going to be good at. With a fighter, with a lot of air refueling, you can provide some of that loiter time with slightly less munitions. So that trade-off's got to happen. Something like a smaller attack aircraft could play a very important role if properly stationed close to the fight, and I think that's what's being looked at for that type of airframe, is being able to get into the fight quickly, get back out of the fight, refit, and come back is where that would come in. Whereas big wing assets, you've got to account for the transit time to bring it back, reload it, and put it back up there. So they all come with trade-offs. They all would play an important role in a CAS fight, and it's really the nature of that CAS fight. One thing that we found with the B-52s and a need to have fighter aircraft with substantial payloads like the A-10 is that there were a lot of targets, and still are a lot of targets in Iraq, Syria against ISIS that require a fair number of weapons. So a really light air attack platform at some point in the fight makes a lot of sense, and it probably makes a lot of sense right now. But there's still going to be times where you need to bring a lot of ordnance to bear, and that's where your bigger fighter assets, and then ultimately up to your bomber assets, that's where you're going to be able to get that capability and resource.
I want to ask you about the people side of the equation. As you said, the base started from humble beginnings when invited here to set up this capability, but now it's between 9,000 and 11,000 people. A lot of our coalition partners are here, and a lot of folks have been living in trailers for a long time. We've seen the French village and the German village and the Australian village, but then also where airmen are living. Toilets or the latrines are outside the spaces. At least they're air conditioned, so that's good. But it's all temporary housing.
Yes.
Qatari government has been investing, and I should just say, for full disclosure, our trip here was sponsored by DIMDEX, the Doha International Maritime Defense Exhibition and Conference, to come over here and to cover that. But talk to us a little bit about that investment, because it's sort of night and day. It's like on the left side are the primitive housing, and then on the other side are actually proper permanent quarters for folks with dining facilities, indoor swimming pool, a great athletic center. Talk to us a little bit about the investment that's going in and how that's changing and improving the lives of airmen.
Yes, Udeid right now, it's definitely a base in transition as we go from Expeditionary, if you go all the way back to the Camp Andy days when it first stood up, to where we're at today, where we have a lot of enduring and permanent facilities, many of them built by the Qataris over time. That transition is something that is ongoing and something that we are constantly in connection with the Qataris on. We have a base master plan that has mapped out from a U.S. standpoint of what we'd like to see this base grow into eventually over the years. That may or may not be accelerated by what the Qataris choose to do and what agreements get made over the coming months. But the way we look at it is they're a willing partner and a partner that has worked with us to understand what their needs are the base in the future, because there's expansion that they want to do in terms of their Air Force and their footprint. and then there's things that we want to be able to do with them as a partner. So really the key at the wing level for us here in the 379th is we're not here to make the policy decisions about how that happens, but we're here to work with our partners on the ground with the Qataris to make sure that the shape of whatever comes for Al Udeid is something that's meaningful to both our missions, to the defense of both our forces and to the defense of the nation of Qatar.
And talk to us a little bit about the future phases of this program. You know, what's on the housing side, what's on the facilities side. There was talk about runway expansions as well. Talk to us a little bit about what are in all of these packages that will expand and augment the capabilities. And as you said, Qatar's been, the Qatar Emery Air Forces have been on an ambitious modernization, acquired F-15s, you know, acquiring the Eurofighter, acquiring the Rafale fighter. So, I mean, there's a lot of air capability that's going to join the capabilities we've got in the form of Mirages and F-16s already. Talk to us a little bit about what the subsequent phases are that are going to be coming in here.
I don't want to get into a lot of, speak for the Qataris or get into a lot of detail of how they're going to bed their forces down, but clearly some of the military buys that they're planning.
But much more on your side of the equation is what I was looking for.
Talking specifically about where we're at, you know, like we talked about, there's a lot of excess capacity here already from an aviation standpoint. What we will eventually do and what we have in our master plan. So it's important to note that. I mean, that's a long-term 10 plus year plan that we would look at over time, is to really transition more towards an enduring model, which would mean more of those permanent style dorms that you saw out there on the other side of base, trying to eventually get rid of the trailers and get rid of that compound entirely and replace it with a more permanent type facilities that are going to provide the comfort and really sustainability for our airmen is what it boils down to. You can only keep a expeditionary facility going for so long, and I would argue that we probably have gotten to the point where we're reaching the limits of what a civil engineer can do to keep those things going. But so we would start really with that. There's a need for replacing a lot of expeditionary operations facilities on the side of the base that we're standing on right now. Similar type tent structures, buildings that were really built to be temporary. And then, you know, discussions about whether family housing comes here is, I would defer to the policymakers on that and what's going to happen going forward. That's a broader discussion. As a wing, we are really supporting our Qataris in the idea phase of that right now. So we do know that in our master plan there are needs in terms of dining facilities and dorms. Really, as the biggest thing would be the two immediate things that we want to look at. But there's development projects all over the base that are being looked at, depending on where all this goes in the coming months.
How would you characterize the relationship you have with your Qatari counterparts on the base?
So obviously we deal primarily with the Qatari Air Force here, being their base. I would characterize that relationship as very strong. They have been very good and willing partners in these meetings about what base development would look like in the future. They want us to understand what they want to do with the base and to make sure that our plans really mesh together in a positive way. In terms of operations, they have been excellent partners up to this point. So we hope for and continue to expect that good relationship to continue.
And I don't want to put you on the spot on this question, but we tend to ask this, you know, especially when we go out in the field. You know, if you were going to ask the secretary or the chief, you know, for something, you know, what would it be from your standpoint that the kind of support? Because I'm sure that when they come out here, they ask you anyway. You know, hey, what do you need, Jeff? Tell us a little bit about, you know, what message you would have for them.
So I think the biggest thing is I'd ask them to keep doing what they're doing, which is stay focused on the airmen. This is an operation that's been here a long time. We have airmen that come here and do amazing work in a rotational way with their deployments. We have our long-term plan, and that continued support that we get all the way up the chain of command is really what's going to make this place great in the coming years. So I don't have a specific ask other than let's continue to take care of our airmen. So.
Colonel Jeff Schreiner, who is the Vice Commander here at the 379th Air Expeditionary Wing, the Grand Slam Wing. Sir, thanks very much. Thanks for taking so much time, and your team's been fantastic in supporting us. Thank you.
Take care.